Hi guys, and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. Last week I did something I haven't done in a long time, and that's photograph a house. This shoot was just a small Airbnb unit that I was photographing as a favor for a friend, but it reminded me that I still have a soft spot in my heart for real estate photography because it has allowed me to do so many other things in my life. So whenever someone asks me, Jan, what do you think is the best way of making money in photography? I usually say real estate photography, especially because it's quite easy to enter and you don't have to have a lot of prior experience. When I started out right after uni, I saw a few job advertisements and applied to them and eventually got taken by one company that trained me up in about a week, and all I needed was my tripod, a full frame camera, a wide angle lens and a flash, and I was ready to go. So there's not a very high barrier to entry in the industry. People are selling their houses all the time, so there's always a demand to have high quality real estate photos. What was great for me with real estate photography that I still had time on the side to do my bird photography, but was also earning quite a decent amount of money during that time that allowed me to then build towards doing the bird photography and the YouTube full time. Unlike nature photography, where we try not to do too much editing, real estate photography definitely requires a lot of editing, and your raw files don't quite look the same compared to the final results. When I photograph a house, I usually take one base raw exposure and then one nice and bright flash shot that I blend together with the other exposure, giving me a nice and even result, nice and bright, and you're also then able to see the outside, which you normally wouldn't be able to capture when you're photographing a house inside. And outside, it can get a bit crazy sometimes. Like in this example, I had to put my hand into the picture because the sun was directly shining into the lens, giving me a lot of weird lens flares. And that also meant that I then had to replace the sky. But with some good techniques in Photoshop, it's actually not that hard to replace the sky anymore. And then with a few more tweaks, like greening up the grass a little bit, you get a nice and lovely to look at image that hopefully a lot of people will click on when they see it on Airbnb. And if you guys want to learn all about image editing, especially when it comes to your nature photos, I would recommend that you check out my PROSETS and my masterclass down there in the description. With my PROSETS that actually also work very good on the real estate photos, as you can see in this example, I enable you with just one click to get a great starting point of your raw files for the editing process. And in my masterclass, I teach you step by step all the little tricks and layers and color adjustments you need to know in Photoshop to make your own images look amazing. So make sure to check these out and also check out my new brush pack that gives you some awesome custom layers in Photoshop down there in the description. I know many of you guys are hopeful that we still see a big firmware update that adds a lot of new features to the R5, but at this stage that seems a little bit unlikely, unfortunately. However, we did see a lot of new firmwares released this week for many different Canon cameras, including the R6 Mark II, R8, R3, R5 and 1DX Mark III. However, when we look through these firmware updates, it doesn't seem like there's any major sort of new features added to the cameras, but rather some minor improvements and some bug fixes. Are you guys going to go ahead and install these new firmwares straight away, or are you going to wait a little bit longer to make sure that they actually work properly? Because lately Canon had a few issues where some of the new firmwares had to be recalled because there was some unforeseen issues. Personally, I'm probably still going to go ahead and install them, and if worst comes to worst, I can warn you guys next week that you shouldn't install the new firmware because there might be some issue, but I'm confident that there won't be any issue, and hopefully the cameras will work that tiny little bit better. Talking about cameras, I had to send one of my R5 bodies to CPS this week to have it repaired because it just kept constantly freezing. I never had any freezing issues with this camera until a few weeks ago. Then again, it froze a little bit on my trip, and on the recent real estate shoot that I did last week, I tried it out again and it probably froze 50 or 60 times continuously in a row and nothing seemed to stop it. So I don't really know what is wrong. I hope to hear from CPS soon, and it seemed like they're going to be able to do some repairs that hopefully fixes that continuous freezing issue, which is pretty annoying. Last week we talked about the rumor that Canon is already planning to replace or re-release one of the RF lenses, and now we can be pretty certain that we will see another 70-200 f2.8 lens at some point in the future, likely with a fully internal zoom, which would be greatly appreciated by many people. I think the external zooms, which are nice for the size, is definitely something that a lot of people don't like in the field, and there must have been such a backlash towards Canon that they're now planning to re-release the 70-200 as an internal zoom copy. And hopefully that new 70-200 would also be able to take color converters, something that the current version can't. Over the last few months, I've done so many camera tests and have so many cameras flying around here that I really needed a few more memory cards, and especially memory cards that I can trust. Now, as a YouTuber, I get a lot of offers to review gear, especially from more unknown companies, but I never committed to review any memory cards because I think it's just too risky. Because with memory cards, I don't really want to try it out and then see that it fails. I need good brand reputation and good reliability in the field. Because it doesn't help me if I get a card for free or cheaper if it actually fails on me. So the one brand that stood out to me that I would like to work with long term was PROSETS, and so I reached out to them and they were happy to send me a few cards that I'll be using going forward, and I have a lot of trust in the brand. All the reviews have been good, so I'm looking forward to be using their cards going forward. And I've also been using their card reader already for many years, because for me that's by far the fastest and nicest card reader, and it also has this cool magnet on the back so you can put it to a computer case, for instance, and it sticks to that. So I got myself a few new SD cards that I can use as secondary cards, like a Nikon Z8 or Canon R5, or 2 cards and a Nikon 7, for instance. I got myself a few micro SD cards that actually come with this cool SD card adapter already, so it's easier to use in a computer or a card reader. And then I also got a few fast CIF express cards. When I got the cards, I was expecting having to cut through those annoying plastic packaging you get with most manufacturers, but with PROSETS you actually get some really nice packaging. It comes in this super small package that is environmentally friendly, slides out, and you have the card right there, and there's basically no plastic rubbish. If you haven't watched my last video, another episode of the bird photography show, you should head over there because you can win one of these cool lens called GroundPod. So watch the video, leave a comment with your favorite gadget, and you will be in the draw to win one of these that will help you to take awesome low angle photos. On to some Nikon news now. Last week, just after my video, Nikon released the ZF camera, a retro full frame camera with the 24 megapixels and some pretty awesome features. Now that we have that retro ZF camera, does that mean we're going to see a Z6 Mark III with similar specs and even more improved autofocus, for instance, or a Z7 Mark III? Or will we going to have to wait a little bit longer for these kinds of cameras? What do you guys think? Because I think that's really what's missing from Nikon's lineup at the moment. You have a great lens and that's well priced, like the 180 to 600, but you don't really have a reliable sort of mid-tier camera like a Z6 Mark III. You have the Z6 Mark II or Z7 Mark II, but their autofocus is really not up to par with like a Z8, for instance. And I think that's what you need. A nice mid-level camera that has good autofocus that can work very well with a lens like the 180 to 600 millimeter. Talking about lenses, after a bit of hype last week, Nikon has also released the 135 f1.8 planar lens. I don't really know what that word means. Let me know in the comments if you know, but it looks to be a fantastic lens with outstanding coating, beautiful bokeh, and really nice features. So if you ordered a ZF camera, I hope you don't have to wait too long before you can actually get it. Talking about wait times, I also read that the 180 to 600 is now shipping the second batch in the US. So if you ordered one, fingers crossed that your 180 to 600 millimeter lens will arrive very soon. And now we're on to Sony. It looks like Sigma is actually releasing a new 2.8 70 to 200 millimeter lens next week for the Sony E mount and the Leica L mount. So that might be an interesting lens for many people because it will likely be at a better price point than the Sony or Leica lenses themselves. What I found quite interesting to see this week as well, that Sony revealed 3 different microphones for their cameras that offer different options in the field to record the sound. I think they only work with Sony cameras, which is a bit unfortunate for me because otherwise I would have definitely liked to try them in the field because they look like great solutions for many creators. And lastly, there's a few more rumors coming up for the A9 III, which is to be rumored to be released between November and January. And one of the rumors has been that it might get a 44 megapixel stacked sensor and super high frames per second. Now I believe the super high frames per second and the stacked sensor, but I'm not quite sure about a 44 megapixel or relatively high megapixel sensor because then it kind of pushes right towards that A1 kind of stratosphere, doesn't it? And at the moment, the A9 II seems to compete more with the R3 Canon lineup, for instance, that is more lower megapixel and fast speed rather than the higher megapixel and the fast speed we have in like an R5 or an A1. Do you guys think Sony is actually going to push that A9 towards the 45 megapixels, or do you think we're going to see something more in the high 20s, low 30s? Let me know in the comments. Also make sure to give me a thumbs up for the video, subscribe to the channel, and also make sure to check out my channel membership where for a small monthly contribution you can support me directly and get some awesome membership perks. So on that note, I'll see you in the next video very soon. Bye!